Gareth, thank you so much for joining FF News' coverage of Sibos 2022. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Just so glad to be back at Sibos. I think we've all missed it.
Right, after 3 years sabbatical, we're now back in person. And with that in mind then, could you tell our viewers a bit more about you? Can you tell us your full name, your job role and your organisation?
Absolutely. So my name's Gareth Lodge. I'm a principal analyst at Celent. We are a research and advisory firm, and I look at payments. So I've been in the payments industry, frankly, far too long.
Well, payments has definitely become one of the fastest changing and most innovative verticals, I'd say, within finance. So you're perfectly placed to tell me some of the trends you've noticed here at Sibos 2022 when it comes to specifically payments.
I think there are quite an interesting mix. There's some things that are been there for a long time, we've been talking about forever. Migration to ISO 222 is well underway with the deadline looming. But it's also now starting to think about those things that come on top of ISO 222, but also how we get there. From an industry that didn't use cloud at all 3 years ago, the pandemic has really changed that. So it's not just cloud first, but how fast can I get to cloud?
Interesting, yeah, it's now no longer that we've got to get there, it's if I'm not there, how much time do I actually have? So with that in mind then, you hear stories of the changing payment volumes and values, increased volume but lower value. What does cloud-based technology enable institutions, both big and small, to handle this change in payments?
I think there's a number of aspects which will be interesting to any organisation. The ability to scale up as well as scale down is key. So I used to work for the UK ACH, where 80% of the capacity sat idle for 80% of the time, but you had to invest 5-6 years in advance. So that saving alone is unique. The ability to have rolling out updates at a much more agile and faster speed gives them a great ability to respond to changes in regulations at a lower cost point, and of course deliver better solutions to the customers. There's the ESG benefits, there's the flexibility, the list goes on. Yeah. So I think that's our key question to the banks, is saying, are you thinking about just a payments renewal, or are you actually thinking about the longer term benefits that you could get from this? Because choosing the right solution now, rather than what you need, but the solution for the future, will make a big difference.
Amazing. Now we've talked about those opportunities, but let's take it back a few years to where we are now, and let's look at some of the sticky points that businesses face when sending money cross-border, for instance. What are the things that are keeping small, medium enterprises and corporates up at the same time?
I think it's the cost and complexity of doing those processes. Domestic payment systems like banks in the UK are highly polished, highly efficient systems. But as soon as you cross the border, who do you know who you're sending it to, the exchange rates, whether the banks are open on that day, etc., etc. So it's the complexity of doing the business in terms of the processes. There's also a very important thing to remember. Payments or money never actually crosses borders. So it's the settlement piece which gets complex as well. So it's the information about the payment as much as anything else.
Amazing. Now, as we've mentioned, we're here today at Sibos 2022. Apart from the trends, what can you see people taking away from this event and maybe starting to realise that they have to bring back into their own organisations because of what they've been hearing on the shop floor?
I think they will, first of all, think, oh my gosh, I really need to double down on my 222 project, because that deadline is looming. And there are people who are swapping vendors even at this late stage because they realise they're not doing it. I think then on top of that, they're now starting to think about the business cases and the use cases from the adoption of 222. I think most importantly is those who are perhaps hesitant about cloud will realise that by doing nothing, they're actually falling behind. They have to do cloud to keep pace with everybody else. So it's a pivotal time in payments.
Amazing. Now with the ISO 20022 standard, what does having that enhanced data set mean for instance, the back end of financial institutions too?
I think there's all sorts of options and possibilities. Now it's in XML, you can have an XML database, so instead of having a payment store by payment rail for each and every country, you can store it once in one place in a much more efficient way. really geeky answer, but so few banks have thought about it.
Yeah.
But equally, it's all the data in there. So we've just done a very large study around payments data monetization, because often it's the information about a payment or the information in a payment that's as valuable as the payment itself. You don't necessarily need to know how fast it's coming, just when it will be there, but what it's for, the automation benefits, and that's what 222 unlocks.